Okay, you're all very welcome to today's webinar. It's getting started with memoQ for Translators, and it will be given by Angelica Zerfas. Angelica is probably the first memoQ trainer that we've ever had, and she's been training with people with memoQ for over 8 years, which is pretty much since people started using the tool. So she's very welcome at. I'd like to tell you a couple of things just in advance of the webinar. Firstly, anybody attending the webinar can use the question box to ask questions during the webinar, and they're also welcome to ask questions at the end of it. The webinar will last for about 35 minutes, and at the end of it, there'll be about 10 minutes for a Q&A. After the webinar, we will be sending you all the log of the questions that people have written, plus the recording of the webinar. And again, if there's any issues with recording quality or any issues during the webinar, please use the question box to highlight that, and we will try and answer it as quickly as possible. So I'd now like to hand over to Angelica and let her start the webinar. Thank you very much. Angelica?
Thank you, Peter. Okay, let me just share my screen with you so that you can see memoQ. This is what it's all about. So we will be looking at how to create a project in memoQ, how it looks like when you translate in memoQ. We'll talk a little bit about terminology and quality assurance, and then also about your questions. If there are any questions that we cannot answer because there's not time at the end, we will answer them in written form. So let's get started. To create a project in memoQ, there are different ways how you can get started here. There would be the new project from the menu, of course, or you could go with create a new project without a template. And here you can see there's a new project without a template and with a template. I would recommend that you start without the template first until you know how memoQ works. And then you can use templates that could do some automation for you. For example, create a new translation memory together with the project so that you don't have to do that manually. So let's create a project. We have a project wizard that guides us through. First of all, our project needs a name. And we need some languages that we're translating. So I'll start with English into German. I hope you don't mind, but German is the only language other than English that I really speak. And some more information about setting up the project. Actually, this is all you need to set up the project, but you can add information to the translations that you make by putting something into the fields like project, client, domain, or subject. This would be information that is going to be saved with each and every sentence that you translate in your project. So let me add some information here. It's project 123, and I'm translating for client A. So let's do the next step. Here we can import the documents. You don't have to import the documents right now. You could also just finish the project, set up the framework really, and then import later on, but you can do it here as well. There are two types of import. So you can import and import with options. The difference is when you use import, then memoQ decides what is the translatable text in the file. If you use import with options, then you have additional options per file type. For example, for a Word file, you could decide that you also want to translate the comments. For an Excel file, you could select the ranges of cells that you want to translate. For a PowerPoint file, you could select if you want to also translate the notes pages. So every file format has additional settings so that you can extract all the translatable content. Right now, I'm going to do just the regular import. Just take one file. You can take as many files as you like and different file formats at the same time. That's also no problem. What happens during the import, memoQ will split up the file into the different sentences that are inside the file. And it also tells you the import path, that's where the file comes from, and the export path. That is where memoQ would save the file if you don't specify anything else. So same folder, same file name, just an underscore and the language of the target language. This is just a suggestion. So as you will see in the end, I can also override that and save it someplace else. Let's go to the next step. This is where we specify in which database we want to save our sentences that we translate, in which translation memory. As you can see, I already have some translation memories. Some of them are English to German, like my project is set up, and others are German to English, so the opposite language direction. I can use either in my project, so I could attach several translation memories to this project, and doesn't matter which language direction they are. The only thing I need to make sure is there needs to be one translation memory that has the same language direction as my project, English to German in this case, so that I can write into it. I can also create a new one, give it a name. It takes the languages from the project, and it allows reverse lookup, so I can also use it in the other language direction. It stores the document name for every sentence. I will know which document it came from. Now this is my working and master translation memory, which means while I translate, I will write into it. Now next step, this is about the terminology databases. So if I already have a terminology database that I want to use, or maybe several, I can just attach them by activating the checkboxes. If not, I can always create a new one, but it's not mandatory. You can also translate without a term base. And that's it for the project setup. Now the project will be opened. Let me close the project so that you can see what has happened in the dashboard. Here is my project that I just created. Double click will open it. And I'm in Project Home. Now Project Home is the area where you can do all the settings in your project. So for example, in the translation memories area, you could still decide that you need another translation memory attached as well. Or in the term bases area, you could decide, well, this is not the term base I want to use. I uncheck it, I check another one. So all the settings for the project are here. In the translations area, you will find your document. Now to open the document, you can simply double click and it will open up as an extra tab in the translation editor. The translation editor shows you the numbers for the sentences, the source text, a column where you type in your translation, a preview area, which is available for Office files, for example, and there is a column that will show different colors and different information while we go through the translation. On the right-hand side, that's the translation results list, so we will see what happens there, what comes out of our databases once we get started with translation. So let me put in a sentence here. You can see that the color changes from gray to orange. Orange means I'm in editing mode, I have changed something. And when I'm satisfied with my translation, I want to save this sentence pair to my translation memory, and that's what I do with the confirm button. There's always also a shortcut key that you can use. So you can use either the mouse or the shortcuts. Now here we can see that I have saved the sentence to the translation memory. memoQ went to the next sentence that I need to translate and has compared this sentence to everything that's in the translation memory. And it found something that's very similar. So it shows again here the sentence from the document and the similar sentence from the translation memory. And it shows with track changes what needs to be changed. So there's a new word that I need to add to my translation. The translation from the translation memory has been added as a translation here already, so I can reuse it and just type in my changes here. You can see there's a 73%, again down here, 73%. That means the source sentence in my document and the source sentence in my translation memory are 73% the same, so very similar. And this is how you would go through the translation document. You type your translation or you reuse the translations that come out of the translation memory and then just confirm to go to the next. So here we have a short, nice sentence, so I need to change that one and confirm again. And there's a 100% match and confirm again. So now that I have several sentences here, I might also see, well, I don't want to only save sentences. Maybe I also want to save terminology. So I want to save the term sentence. It's a very important term, and I can just mark the 2 and then say I want to add the term. That would give me an extra small editing window where I can add more information, or if I want to make it really quick, I just say quick add the term. That means it just goes to the term base and that's it. As you can see, every sentence, every segment that has that word sentence inside now shows that blue highlight. And on the right-hand side, I not only get the sentences from the translation memory in red, but also the terminology in blue. Now, clicking on the terminology, I get a different window down here, which shows me the content of the translation of the terminology database. I can always go inside and change the entry. So, for example, I'm translating here for a client who says, well, the translation for sentence needs to be Satz, but there's also a second translation, but that's a forbidden one. So I can also add that and say, okay, that would be my forbidden term. I add it as a synonym, and I say in the usage, this is forbidden. And now let's confirm that. And here you can see that now it comes up in the results list as well, but not in blue, which would be the allowed terms, but in black, which would be the forbidden terms. Something else, and this is new in version 8.3 now, with a click of a button, you can add a sentence. So not only terms, but also an example, like a context example. You can take it from your translation. So if I say, well, this is a very nice context example for this term, I can say I want to update the term with this sentence. So here, this is a new sentence, would now come up as a context example whenever the term sentence has been found. So this is quite nice and quite easy to get terminology into your term base. Now let's go on with translation. This is an example about how memoQ treats numbers. Let's see what it does. And you can see here, as soon as I start typing, I get this pop-down list, and that's because there is a term in the term base. So I don't have to copy it over or double-click here to take it over into my translation. As soon as I type something that memoQ already knows, it will come up with the information, and I can just select it from the list. Just press Enter, and it would be there. Should be this one. There we go. So now when I confirm this sentence, you will see that memoQ tries to be intelligent, it tries to help. The sentences are pretty similar. The numbers are different in the source text. So memoQ tries to adjust the number as well. But still there is some more text that I need to change, and memoQ tells me with the track changes. And then I find, oh, I made a mistake in my translation in the previous sentence. That should be different. So just go back in here, change the sentence. Don't forget to confirm it again. And confirm this one as well. And there we go. Now here we have something that can happen all the time. Depending on where the file comes from, you might have two segments that actually belong together. But they were broken apart because in the source text there was a line break at that point. So what we do is we just go in here, say we want to join this sentence with the next one. So the two parts are being joined. The area or the point where the line break was will be marked with a small placeholder. The placeholder is something that you should keep in your translation. Let's change that. Okay, so as I said, there's this placeholder in the source, and there's the placeholder, and the placeholder should also be there in the target. If you place it inside or at the end or at the beginning, that doesn't matter, it just has to be there. If you don't know where the line break should be and you want to do the post-editing in the final file afterwards, that's fine, but the line break has to be there. To get the line break there is a button, copy the next tag, and now the tag is in, everything's fine, we can confirm. If we don't do that, so let me just take it off, forget it, and confirm the sentence again, I will get a message, an error message, because memoQ knows when there is something, a placeholder, for example, that needs to be there so that you can export the file again from memoQ. And that's the so-called quality assurance. It will show you if there's something wrong in your text. And I see that now I have made some mistakes during translation. For example, there is a grammatical mistake. I should change that here and confirm again. And I could do a search and replace, for example, to change that all over the file. Okay, let's get the tag back. Another thing that could happen is that here you can see there are two sentences in one because there is no space in between. And here I could go the other way and say, I want to split this, split it into two sentences. So you're very often free to decide what you want to translate together and where you want to split sentences so that it makes sense for translation. And the last thing I wanted to show here is the last sentence. I don't get a match. I don't get a suggestion for the translation of the whole sentence, but I do get a so-called concordance. So memoQ tells me that there's a part of the sentence that already exists in other sentences that already have been translated and saved. So to take a look, you can do a double click, and you will get a list of all the sentences and their translations, and selected or marked in a highlight the word combination or terms that already appeared. This is something that you can also do manually. So for example, if you want to look up every word or every sentence in the translation memory that contains the word sentence, just to make sure that you translated it correctly, you can mark it, and then you can do a concordance search manually, and it will come up with all the sentences that contain this word, with all the translations, and then you could either copy and paste from here, or you can just take a look how things need to be translated. Now, in the end, once you have translated everything, you should make sure that there are no error messages. So this one should not be there, but it will go away as soon as I confirm the sentence because the placeholder is there, so everything's fine. Something else that might happen, so for example, that depends a little bit on the settings of the QA check. I'm going to delete the dot at the end. My QA check is set up in such a way that memoQ will check if there is a dot in the end of the source sentence. There should also be a dot at the end of my translation. If I miss something like that, I confirm the sentence, I will get a small message, small flash symbol. Now you could either do a double click on that flash symbol to see the message, or I prefer that. You can switch this preview window from the actual preview of the file to the review. So you can switch on all the error messages or other messages that come up with the file or with the segment. And here you can see source and target end with different punctuation. Now, if that needs to be like that, I can say I want to ignore this message. Then the flash turns blue. Or I could say, well, yes, you're right. I need to have a dot, change it, confirm it, and the message is gone. So in the end, once you have translated everything, then you can either close the document or you can export it from here. In the Documents ribbon, there's an export. And here's the export into the stored path. That's the path that memoQ has suggested at the very beginning. So same folder, same file name, just the extension of the target language. If I don't want to do it that way, I can say I want to export with dialog. And then it asks me, where do you want to save the file? And what name should I give it? I'll say, well, I'm put in my initials, and I want to save it in a different folder. So you're totally free to save the file wherever you like. And this is just because there were some rows that were untranslated, so they will be in the source language still in my exported document. So you can export the document at any time in the process. It doesn't have to be fully translated for you to be able to export it. So that's about the translation itself. Now let's take a look very quickly at how do I add a new file to my translation project. So if I get a new file to translate, I can use the same project. I can import the document. Let's take document number 2. Will be added as a second document. Here you can also see the progress, the green progress bar going up, depending on how many segments I have confirmed. Now for this second document, I would like to know, first of all, is there anything in the document that I already have in my translation memory? So how fast will I be able to translate? How much recycling will I get from my translation memory? And that's done by the so-called statistics. You click on the statistics, and we want to do an analysis. So compare the sentences from the document to the translation memory and calculate. And now it tells me, all in all, there are 12 segments in this file. There will be six segments or sentences that do not have a match from the translation memory, but there will be 2 that have a very high similarity to something in the translation memory, and there will be 1 that already exists as exactly the same sentence, and there will also be 101% matches. Yes, I know there's nothing like 101%, but we needed something to show that this is better than 100% match, so it's not only exactly the same sentence, but it's exactly the same sentence in the same context. So the same sentence before and after, which means that the translations we have for that in the translation memory are very probably the right translations for these sentences. So now that I know that there's a lot in my translation memory that I can reuse, I could either open up the document and just go through the sentences, sentence by sentence, as I've done before, or I can automate this a little bit more and do a pre-translation. So that would be a preparation step to do pre-translation and say every exact match, so every 100% match, every 101% match should be already inserted into my file. Let's just run that. You see, things are already being translated. I open the file, and here you can see here my 101% matches and my 100% match. The small asterisk means that there are 2 sentences that could be 100% matches. So if I click in here, you will see that there are 2 sentences that could come up as 100% matches. Could also be that they have different translations as they have right now here. So that's about the translation, the projects. A little bit more about terminology maybe, because very often you probably have terminology databases or terminology lists already that you would like to reuse in a terminology database. And it's very simple to import those. First of all, let's take a look at the term base. So there's my term base attached to my project. I can edit that, and it will show me that one entry that I already have, the English sentence and German Satz and segment. Down here, I can see again Satz, segment, and in the usage, one is the forbidden term, the other one is the allowed term. Now into this term base, I would like to import a list. Now let's take a look at the list. Just a second. So I've set up a small terminology list. So I have a column for German terms. I have for one term, I have a synonym, and I also have another synonym. And after that, I've put something that's called non-term. So Möhre and Karotte, these are 2 similar words. You could use them as synonyms. They're not exactly synonyms, but for the sake of this webinar, we think of them as synonyms. Gelbe Rübe is something that, because I come from the southern part of Germany, that's how we say it, but it's very colloquial, so it's not High German. So in that case, I would say, well, this term is not allowed. And that's what I'm doing with this non-term. So the non-term will actually set the checkbox forbidden when I import this list into my term base. So if you have synonyms, you should use different columns for them. Then I have some more information, like a subject matter information, like a note of some kind, and could also have in English several columns, so that's not a problem. So this I'm going to import into my term base. Just make sure that the file is closed when you import it, otherwise 2 applications will try to open the same file. So now we're going to import. We're going to select our Excel file. The first row usually contains the names of our columns, so the headings of our columns. You see an example of how your import file looks like, and you get all the names of the columns down here in this list. And now we just have to assign them to the different areas in the term base. So for example, the subject matter. There is a so-called other field that you can use for subject matter information. Well, let me just move that up a little bit. So that would be here, this field. So that field where that's called subject could be the one that I fill in with the subject matter information. So I'll select the field subject. There's a column that's called note, and there's also a field called note. It doesn't have to be called note in your Excel file. It could be anything. Just assign it to the note field. The note field would be this one. Then we have a column for German. That's going to be imported as a term for the German variant that I have used for my project. Same for the second column, German. Select the right language, a third one. And then we have the usage where we have this information non-term. So this is something that applies to the column before it, and it's also one of the other fields. And that's the one called term information. So it's information on the term that I'm importing. And then we have English. Again, import as term. Make sure that it's the right English that you've used for your project. And that's it. Let's import. And here we have the list of our terms now. If I click on that one and select the different terms in here, you can see that the gelbe Rübe has been set to forbidden as I intended. So it's really quite simple to either get the terms from your document into the term base, or you import a list. It's also quite simple to export a list. So if you export the terminology list, then you can say I want to export as an Excel file. You can select the fields, the content that you want to export. So if there's something in the subject matter or in the subject field, you want to export that, but maybe you don't have anything in the domain or in the client or the project, and you can see the things are going out of the list here. So this is the example of what you're going to export. So maybe created at, created by, I don't need all that. I don't have an image at the moment. I don't have a term definition. Well, actually, now I'm selecting everything that I'm going to export. Right, so it's the other way around. So whatever I check here is going to be exported. So if you want to make a full list, select everything. Otherwise, just take off whatever you don't need. There you go. And export to Excel or to CSV if you want to use it in another system that's not Excel. It also goes into other term-based systems of other providers. This is the Multiterm XML here, for example. All right. So one last thing I would like to show before we go into the questions is now we have a project, we have translated a new file, but you probably already have files that have been translated and you want to reuse them in memoQ, and that would be a so-called alignment. For that, we would need to go to the live docs. So in your project, you go to the live docs. We need a container where we can put in all the files that we already have translated. So we create a new one. Just give it a name. Make sure it's selected. And then we can add the so-called alignment pairs. So we have a file with the source language text, and we have a file with the target language text. So we add the source document. Oh, I'm going to add 2 of them. And we can add our target documents. And if memoQ doesn't recognize automatically which documents belong together, you can always do that manually, like the DE doc belongs to the EN. Just mark the 2 of them and say I want to link these documents and the other ones as well. And the OK starts the alignment. Now memoQ will go through the documents and try to connect the sentences inside the documents. So let's open the first one. And here you can see this is a sentence, das ist ein Satz. So it goes through the document segment by segment. The first sentence in the source document will be connected to the first sentence in the target document. Please note that alignment systems are not intelligent, so they don't know language. So they will not find the connection by knowing the content of the sentence. They will go by the structure of the file. And here I can see that there are 5 sentences in the source, but only 4 in the target, so not everything has a connection. memoQ tried to connect it, but said, well, at this point, I would probably need to split the sentences because that's not the right connection. This sentence does not have a translation, but this sentence needs to be connected to that one. So you select the sentences that need to be connected or disconnected. So you can disconnect this here and say, I want to remove the link and connect this with that. I want to create a synchro link, would put them both on the same line. Or let me just do something else. Connect that one with that one. If it goes across text, you would create a cross link. So that would be the way how you work with the alignment. In the end, you can either export it to your translation memory directly, which is connected to the project, or use it as it is in the background for translation. And that's the last thing I would like to show. I have this other alignment. Let's take a look inside. So sentences are connected, but I'm not going to work through this alignment. I'll just leave it as it is. I'm just going to add a file that contains similar content. So new file, let's open that. And you will see that there are matches coming, but I have never translated this document or something similar before. So my translation memory does not contain that kind of text. And just to prove, I will uncheck the translation memory so that you can see there's still matches coming. So this is coming from the alignment. Let's go here, because that's a sentence that's 100% the same in my document and in the alignment. It still comes up as an 85% match because I have not confirmed anything in the alignment and I have not finished the alignment. But from here, I could always go back, right mouse click, show the document, so going in the alignment, and say, well, this and this, that one I want to confirm. Now let's go back to the document. And it should come up quickly with, let's close that one here. Sometimes you have to reopen the file. I don't know why. There we go. Now we have a 90% match, so 5% better than before. And let's go back to the document and just assume the alignment has been confirmed, everything is finished. And then I go back to my document, and now I get 100 or 101% match. So depending on how you work with your alignments, you can reuse them just like a translation memory from either not doing anything with the alignment or really working through and confirming the sentences. So let's go into the questions. Peter, do we have anything that you were not able to answer in between and I need to answer now?
Yes, we have one. Let me get it. The question was, can I change the default settings for importing documents? If I do not want the HTML preview to be generated every time, can I change it somewhere?
Yes, this is something that actually you can switch off. So if you do a right mouse click in the area of the documents, you can say enable preview for translations. So if you uncheck that, then memoQ will not do any preview, HTML previews while importing from now on. So this is something that you can switch on or off as you like.
As I've mentioned in the chat, if anybody wants to ask a question now in person, they can do so by raising their hand, and hopefully I'll see them. There's another question that's just come in, so I'm going to ask you that. There's several questions have just come in. If I add any pictures to items to my terminology database, how can I export my terminology database as a multi-term XML with these pictures inside?
As far as I know, let's just try that. Let me go to my term base, edit that. Let's see, strawberry. I think I have a nice image for a strawberry. Terminology. There's my strawberry image. Now let's export that and see what comes out of that. So Multiterm XML. Need to choose the folder so that I can find it back. Yeah, terminology is fine. And export. So let's see what it does. So now you have the Multiterm XML plus a folder that contains the image. And if you use it like that, just put these two, the XML and the folder, into the same place and import from there into Multiterm, the pictures will come up.
And also this is quite a pertinent question because we're at the moment just adding a feature within memoQ to import and export pictures into the terminology in version 8.4, which will be due out at the end of April. So this will be enhanced again at that stage. So, I'd like to add another question. We've been asked, somebody's asked, I've often worked with my own TM and a TM from the client, and they want to know, is there any way to save translated segments to both TMs?
Not at the same time. Well, sort of, yeah. So the only thing that you need to make sure is the translation memory that you want to save into while you work in your file. So when you do the confirm, that needs to be the working translation memory. And the other one, let's say this is my client's translation memory, and do a right mouse click and say that's the master translation memory. So I get matches from both. But whenever I save something while I work, I put it into my working translation memory. The master translation memory can be updated at the end with all sentences that are in my document. That's a task up here where it says confirm and update. So if you do that, all sentences from your document, all confirmed sentences from the document will be sent to the master translation memory. So there's no way to update it to translation memories at the same time, but with these different functionalities, you can do that and just say the working one, that's why I'm saving while I confirm. The master is the one where I confirm at certain intervals. So I don't have to do it at the end really only. I can do it in between, but then it would take everything from the project, from the document, depending on what you select, and saves it to the translation memory.
And we've got a very common question from translators. I often work with dead PDF files with a lot of formatting. I use Abby Fine Reader, but the conversion is not always ideal. Is there anything I should do differently in order to use memoQ?
You can try to import with the with one of the filters that memoQ offers with the import with options. So don't convert the file yourself with Abby, but try to import. I don't have a PDF right now. Let me just take another file. I'm just going to show you the settings. So it would be a change of the filtering configurations. That would be a PDF configuration. So there is the conversion to docx, so that memoQ does the conversion for you. And you will have to try it out if it works better than Abby or not. But Abby is pretty good, actually. And why the segments or why the documents don't come up really nicely and they have a lot of formatting inside, that really depends on what what application was used to create the PDF file. So it's nothing really that a tool that converts a PDF can handle. But what you could also try, there is a service that can be called from within memoQ. It's called TransPDF. It's a paid service, so you have to pay or you have to have an account there, and then they would convert the PDF for you for working in memoQ, and in the end they would create a PDF out of your translation again. that's pretty good also. I don't know how it compares to Abby, so I would have to try that out, but it's pretty good, and it can also do scanned PDFs. So not only text PDFs, but also scanned.
Okay. Just at this stage, I just want to tell anybody who we don't ask their questions that we will give you the information afterwards, and we will answer all questions and let everybody see those answers in when we're sending out information about the webinar afterwards. So, and one question that we're not going to ask at the moment is to explain a little about word counts, as there's an awful lot to explain about word counts. So the person that asked that question, I'm sorry, but we'll send you some information. The next question is, I often leave comments within memoQ for clients as I'm translating. Is there a way to get these to export as comments in Word during export? I've been manually adding them to Word by looking at my translations in memoQ after export, but this is tedious and time consuming.
Yep, that's true. That's tedious. So there is a setting in the options, as far as I know, when it comes to the export, where you can export comments of all types to Word files. It only works for Word, as far as I know. So any comment that you make would then also export as a comment into the Word file. So it's in options, miscellaneous, export.
We've been asked, is the autocomplete feature of the term base available in the memoQ web version?
In memoQ web, as far as I know, you cannot save anything to the term base. Unless this has been changed in the latest version, I'm not sure, but I don't think you can.
I'm not sure. I thought you could, but I don't think you can do what they're asking here. You know, I don't think the autocomplete, if they mean the Muse, I don't think it works.
Oh, you mean that pop-down list of suggestions when you start typing a term? I haven't seen it yet, but I haven't really tried it out. So this is something we'll have to answer afterwards.
Just on the memoQ web version, it's something we're working on quite a lot in the last few versions, and we're continuing to do that. So it's improving all the time. I'd like to know if I can set up the spell checker according to my Word spell checker.
Yes, that's possible. So again, in the options, there is the area for spelling and grammar. So you would select the language that you want to have the spell checker for, like English or whatever, and say, I want to do the spell checking with Microsoft Word. So it would use your Microsoft Word spell checker and your custom dictionaries that you have there for the spell checking in memoQ.
Okay, and this is going to be the last question, and there are some questions that we'd really have to write you an answer, and we're going to do that after this webinar. We'll be sending you an email with details of how you can view the recording and also the question log. But the last questions, Angelica mentioned an import option that allows you to prompt memoQ to include certain text for translation, like comments and words. Is there also an option to prompt memoQ to ignore certain text?
I would need to know what file type you're talking about and what option you would need, but there are quite a lot of options to, for example, let's see, if we have a Word file and inside the Word file there's text that has a certain style, then we could say, we add the name of the style and say external, which means it's not to be translated, so it's going to be ignored. So that is something you could do. Or if you have an Excel file, you could say, do not import these ranges. So then you can select the ranges and just select the part of the Excel file that should not be translated. So yes, there are certain ways to include or exclude text depending on what you're actually talking about.
That they were thinking of PDFs in relation to that question. Does that?
PDF? No. No, in PDF there is no setting where you can exclude something from just the things that have to do with the conversion to docx. But there's really not much that you can set here to ignore certain type of text.
Okay. Well, we've now reached the end of the webinar. As I've mentioned, we're going to answer these questions in the email. We'll send everybody a list of the questions we got asked and the answers that we've given to them. And we'll also send everybody a URL for the webinar. I'd like to thank everybody for attending, and I'd also like to thank Angelica for an excellent webinar. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you also from my side that you have come to the webinar. Always appreciated to have so many people listening in. All right, so I think we can close the webinar for today, and well, hope to see you, hear you, read you at one of the other webinars.
Yes, I understand. Take the money and go away.